So you said at the beginning of the message, 18 years ago, the first time you preached on this platform was on joy.
Yep.
That's wild.
It was a Fruit of the Spirit series called Inside Out.
Okay.
And walking through the 9 fruit of the Spirit. And I think Pastor Dennis was like, all right, let's give this guy, I was a fusion pastor, so 2 years I've been on staff, not even 2 years. And I'm sure he's like, let's just give this guy a shot.
How much advance notice did you have?
That was 18 years ago. I have no clue. I looked at my notes and it's funny how different I write 18 years later compared to then. Like literally it was I sent it to all the guys who were preaching this weekend and it was just this stream of consciousness. It was like 10 pages long of just like,
gosh. Yeah.
And how fast I used to talk. People think I still talk fast, but I mean, especially back then. It was like 10 pages of just nonstop fire cannon joy.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said that you brought up the 18 because I put something together tonight. I've known you for a long time.
Yeah.
But I put something together tonight that I want to ask you about. So I've known you as young adult pastor, as Hamilton Mill pastor, and then in this new role, almost 5 years now, as senior pastor at Victory Church.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that that's an easy job.
Yeah.
Long hours dealing with countless drama of, people stuff and heavy decisions or whatever. But you've sort of always been the same person throughout that time, older, wiser, all that stuff. But you kind of mentioned that joy is kind of a part of who you are. Is that like the secret sauce for Johnson?
Maybe. Some of the exec team, when we were trying to come up with the values of the church, courageous, humble, empowering, connected, and kind, I kept bringing up joy. I was trying to find a way to get joy in there, and we just couldn't do it. But it's in all of it. But it almost became like an inside joke at that time among some of the exec team, of just like Johnson's just going to talk about joy at some point in one of our meetings, and how it's a fundamental thing, especially for the staff. That's the main thing we were talking about. Like I want the staff to have joy. Not just happiness, but I differentiate between the Tigger and the Eeyore because that's all external.
Right.
It's really like Tigger and Eeyore of the soul. Like, do we have this resiliency of the soul?
Yeah.
In fact, I was talking to somebody after service just a few minutes ago, and I think maybe that's what it is. Like how joy takes shape in me.
Wow.
Is this thing of like I think it turns into resiliency, of I'm just going to keep going.
Yeah.
No matter what happens, because I know bigger than what happens are the things that'll never change. The circumstances are going to go up and down. Circumstances are going to change, but God never changes. His promises never change. So in essence, like the gospel, preaching the gospel will never go out of style because the message doesn't change.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And the one we're preaching about never changes, and his promises never change. And so I think, through the highs and the lows, and we've been through some of that, the highs and the lows, I can still cling to the one who's not going to change, even though everything else is changing. And I think, there is that emotion that sparked through that when I look at that, there can still be a smile on my face. But I really do think maybe that is in me, it's taken the shape of like resiliency of like, okay, I know my life is in a class 5 tornado right now, but those things are never going to change.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of have to lift my eyes up. I've said this before. We read this book together years ago about the Jesus being in the storm.
Yeah.
And he just made this big deal, the author did, about Jesus showed us you can be in the storm, but the storm doesn't have to be in you.
Yeah.
Right? And when the disciples were on the boat, they're freaking out because the storm was no longer outside them, the storm had come inside them. But Jesus showed you can be in the storm, but the storm doesn't have to move internal. It can stay external. And I think that's one of the things that I think joy helps me to do.
Yeah.
And faith and trust, it keeps those emotions out there.
Yeah.
It keeps the storm out there. And in here, I'm clinging to the things that'll never change.
That's so good. Yeah. So you mentioned like the Eeyore Tigger thing. And I mean, we've seen a ton of that over the years. Yeah. There's also that flip side of people that are just always the Tigger,
sure.
You know what I mean? And don't have the depth of like some hard stuff going on. I guess, like, how do you have joy in sadness when things aren't going well? Like, how do you have that bubble up on the inside?
Yeah, I think sometimes I was talking to somebody earlier as well, because their cousin passed away 3 days ago.
Wow.
And their mom just asked them to do the eulogy.
Oh my gosh.
And he said, this whole week I was dreading it. The last few days he was dreading it. It's next week. But he said after hearing this, said now I actually have a grid to view it through. And he's like, because I was just going to like sit in my sadness, And what I talked to him about, I said, actually sitting in your sadness can be one of the healthiest things for you to do. You just can't sit there alone.
Wow.
Like sitting, that's the whole idea of sitting Shiva,
right?
Like the Jewish tradition of mourning is go into a dark room, light a candle, and deal with it. Because if you don't, you just sweep it under the rug, turns into a bump under the rug, And what we find lots of times with the Tiggers is Tiggerness is their coping mechanism.
Yeah.
Of like, I'm just going to act like I'm happy all the time. And really it's just avoidance. Because if I'm actually slow down, I'm going to feel those emotions. So I have to spin myself back up.
Yeah.
And so, but actually the healthiest thing we could possibly do is probably just sit in that sadness. You got laid off, sit in the sadness. Just don't sit alone.
Yeah.
If somebody passed away, sit in the sadness. Just don't do it alone. Invite God to come into that place. And then what can actually happen is that God coming into that place, when I tell the story a lot, but when Summer and I had the miscarriage years ago, it was a diffusion service that I sat down and God sat with me.
Yeah.
And him sitting with me did not change the circumstance. Circumstance was still the same. So there was still this emotion of sadness in a sense, but deeper than the shell of sadness was this deep awareness of God with me.
Wow.
And not being invisible. And he never said why it happened, but he said where he was when it happened, and that my son was with him now, like all that sort of stuff. And for me, that's what I mean, a Tigger of the soul. Like there's a way that even in tragedy, in a sense, you can still be like, but man, I'm not alone.
That's so good.
And there's bigger things than this. And like Paul says, it kind of turns it into light and momentary.
Yeah.
Because I know, even as tragic as some of the things that people are going through, I know this sounds quaint, but like, was it 50 years of it? 60 years of it?
Yeah.
Compared to eternity?
Yeah.
And I think that's what Paul's saying, like it washes over and it turns it light and momentary. And I think there's a way, that's how even in the midst of a tragedy, you can still have this joy. Because dude, the tomb's still empty, man.
Yeah.
Like Jesus is still alive. I'm still born again. I'm still a child of God.
Yeah.
Like, we always say the sun is still shining above the clouds all the time. Even if it's raining, the sun's still up there.
Still there.
And I think that's the disposition Christians have to have.
Yeah.
Is I know my life's super rainy right now, but that sun's still up there.
That's so good. That's so good. Okay, last question. If people would take one thing away from this message this weekend, what would it be?
Whew. Yeah, I'll leave you with this. So I kind of close the sermon with the thought of like, embrace joy today.
Mm-hmm.
And it just became really real to me when I was writing the sermon, how I'll talk to people who are Christians, who they just are trapped in their circumstances. And I'm sitting there thinking like, dude, you've been born again for 20 years. 25 years, whatever. Like you're stuck in your sadness, you're stuck in the emotion, you're stuck pointing fingers at the government, all the chaos, the stuff that's happening right now. And I'm like, how many hundreds of sermons have you sat through that address this very thing, And I think it struck me tonight while we were talking about it, of like how easy it is to just kind of, we get in the routine, we come into a room, we hear a song, we hear a message, we take some notes maybe, and then we go home and we kind of leave it in that place.
Yeah.
And I just think, how we would view it is happiness is available to us out there. Maybe we get joy in here, like in a church service.
Yeah.
But then we go back out there and then there's circumstances. Then we come back and here's this respite, is like a safety place.
Mm-hmm.
But like we can take joy with us out there. And I think that's what I would want people to know is like literally you can wake up on Monday morning and have joy. And you can be in traffic Friday rush hour and have joy. And you can be at a funeral and for the love of God, you can have joy. And you can get laid off and you can still have joy. And your girlfriend can break up with you, you can still have joy. Your finances can be in the red, you can still have joy. Because again, it's not based on the stuff that changes. You may feel happy, you may feel sad, but bigger than that, deeper than that, more permeating, more true than the things that change the stuff that'll never change. And that's why I would love to be a part of a family that just grabs a hold of the things that'll never change in God and just builds their life in that place.
Yeah.
You know,
Choose joy today.
choose joy today.
Thanks, Pastor. Appreciate it.